All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a discussion of the Library Trilogy by Mark Lawrence, which begins with The Book That Wouldn't Burn and continues in book 2, The Book That Broke the World. Unfortunately, I cannot hold up my copy of The Book That Broke the World because my daughter stole it from me because she loves Mark Lawrence's books. So, so I don't have it with me. It's in New York City, being read probably right now as we speak. So we are here today. Let me introduce my guests here. So I am joined today by Jarrod from the Fantasy Thinker. Hello, Jarrod. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is a fun book that was fun to read, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I have lots of thoughts, so much to say about this. But Carlos is half of StoryTube is joining us today. Unfortunately, the other half, Yolanda, is not going to be joining us. She's
She's
snubbing
not
us.
ready.
She can watch Spain play soccer. I don't know why. Is that
Yeah, so the reason I'm wearing clashing colors is that the Celtics are about to win the NBA and Spain are playing in the European Championships in
and
football.
you're
So
just
soccer.
feeling it all. I
I'm
love it.
doing it all. I gotta wear my Celtics hat because Jared's here
And if anyone
Yay.
doesn't know, Carlos is actually half Irish and half Spanish. So that's actually how he dresses all the time.
all the time. Signpost. Yeah.
So, so, it is so great to be joined by you both today and to be talking about one of my favorite authors of all time. I just think he's such a brilliant writer when it comes to combining, not caring about the boundary between the supposed boundary between fantasy and science fiction. And
Yeah.
this trilogy, probably more than any other, I think,
Yeah.
illustrates that tendency in Mark Lawrence. So, but we're going to start with a non-spoiler assessment for anyone who hasn't read either book yet, and then we're going to go into spoilers for both books at this point. So let's begin, Jarrod, with your assessment of the trilogy thus far, non-spoiler.
Ah, well, I think you're right about the nature. I think these books bring out the nature of fantasy and what fantasy can do, because it's not your typical like Tolkien type fantasy. It's definitely fantasy, but it's just in such a different vein. And um I think I'm glad that it actually kind of broadens the definition of what fantasy can be compared to what we've been used to. I think it's quite unique in some of the setting that it brings up and some of the things and themes that it brings into it. And it also has, well, it has a magical library. If you're a
Who
big
doesn't love
reader,
that?
like, yeah, if you're a big reader like we are, how can you not love that in the first place? But I really like how he approached just fantasy in general and just kind of almost redefined it for a lot of things. And that blew me away. And this is my first Mark Lawrence exposure.
Oh, cool.
I have
Okay.
not read his
Yeah.
previous, so
Nice.
um, and I jumped in with 2 feet and I learned how to swim very fast. It was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I think this is a very good starting point to me. If you're someone out there who hasn't read any other books by Mark Lawrence yet, this is a great starting point. And I've always liked to point out that because I think he's sort of been brushed with this label of painted with this label of grimdark because his very first trilogy was grimdark, but nothing else he's written after that is actually grimdark. So this is not grimdark, in case you're wondering. It is.
No,
It's kind of hard to put any label on it at all, other than just awesome. But it is. It is fantasy, I suppose we can call it that. But oh,
Oh,
yay.
your Apple computer is doing the same thing again.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know how to turn it off. But anyway,
Can
um,
we do the heart
yeah,
thing?
we
Is
can
that
do
the
it
other one?
just for you guys.
there you
Go.
go. Yay.
There you go.
So, Carlos, what is your non-spoiler assessment of anything you want to say about the Library Trilogy
Yeah.
thus far?
Yeah, so Mark Lawrence is probably one of my favorite fantasy authors, and probably because he doesn't write stereotypical fantasy, or he blends those genre boundaries, which I like very much. But I also am quite partial to sci fantasy,
Hmm.
which I think he also enjoys. And that atmosphere that creates as well, because it gives it a sense of unpredictability. And these books are probably my sixth and seventh or something like that, of the Mark Lawrence that I've read. And I love the first book. I adore the first book. And I think I have some more issues with the second book that could just be second book isms.
Uh-huh.
Um, and some bits where I just found myself a little confused.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think maybe I'm of the opinion that this could have been one big book
Hmm.
rather than maybe a trilogy. But I'll hold out that, you know, assessment until we get the final book.
Yeah.
Um,
Otherwise, it
yeah,
also could have been the book that broke your back when you tried to lift it.
excellent, excellent joke, Philip.
That's why we're here, right? Yeah. Anyway, thank you both. I love that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that's in more detail momentarily. But I will say that the book that wouldn't burn was my very favorite book of 2023, and I read the book that broke the world with so much anticipation. I think it's a great follow-up, and I feel like it left me really, really wishing that book three was out already when I got to
Mhm.
the end of it. But I will have to wait like the rest of the world. But I'm gonna let you guys. I think it's time for us to launch into the spoiler section, and more of my feelings will come out as we discuss the spoilers. But for me, book two is a great follow-up. And I also was a little bit confused though. So this might be because of the amount of time that has passed between. There is a helpful summary in the beginning of the book that broke the world of here's what happened, but it is a complex trilogy. There's a lot of
Yeah.
ideas here. There's a lot
Yeah.
of intricacy. There's a lot of playing with time and chronology, and I think because of that, I likened the first book to a giant puzzle. And I
Mhm.
felt like I was just kind of understanding as I was putting more and more pieces what I was actually looking at. It's like when you put a puzzle together and you don't know what it is until you put it all together and you see, oh, it's like when I got to the last page of the book that wouldn't burn, I wanted to immediately reread it because I just felt like, oh, now I understand what he was doing.
Yeah.
That's what so I wanted to just go back and reread the whole thing right away. And I got more of that feeling in the book that broke the world. But because of these intricacies, I do think it is a series where you have to be sharp, you have to be on top, you have to be paying attention. That is for sure.
Mhm.
But that said, let's get into some spoilers. I thought we could start. Jarrod, I think, mentioned the library setting here. So spoilers, everyone. This is your warning. We're going to get into more detail about this library. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this as a setting from either one of you. Jarrod, would you like to go first on this one?
Sure. I mean, this the library setting in especially like in the first book, that's where we're first introduced to it. And I love how in the first book we're learning along with Rivera, the main character.
Hmm.
We're learning along with her about what this library is and what it does. And that's a fascinating way to learn about it as you go along with the character. But there's because we don't get immediately what the library means to history and stuff right away. Um, it's all just a fascinating journey. And then by the time we get to the end of the book, we're starting to discover that this library is central to like this world, but also many other worlds, like the multiverse, I guess you could say.
Right.
And you get these little, I love how you get this all these little hints that this library is connected to so many other things besides just the small little world that we were introduced to with Lavera and with the other character, Ivar,
Yeah.
who kind of grew up in this library.
Mhm.
But it was a very limited space though, so you don't know that much.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I think it was fascinating because you learned along with everybody else what was going on, and the more answers you got, the more questions you had.
Brilliant.
And uh, so at the end of the first book, like you said, Philip, it would have been great to go back and reread because I know I missed a ton of stuff
Yeah.
the first time through, and but I also was like, but I also wanted more, just like you said, and so um, this setting is a book reader's dream, and
Yeah.
and he emphasizes that with a little bit of metafictional stuff, with the little epigraphs in the beginning,
Oh, the
because
I
epigraphs
love
are just
those.
so great. I mean,
yeah, and
I
I-
love them.
yeah, the
yeah, and
epigraphs are brilliant. So
they
quotable.
are so
Yeah.
quotable, and some of them are actually quotes, and
Yeah.
the
Or fake quotes.
or fake quotes, yep,
Yeah.
and so you get that sense that because that the epigraphs are coming from somewhere else other than just our main story, you
Right.
know, and he's working those metafictions into the story as a part of what he's trying to do here.
Yeah.
And I think in the second,
Meta is a word that I think we're gonna have to use a few times during this
yeah,
discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think in the second book we actually get a lot more of that, and we get bigger a bigger picture of what's going on in
Yeah.
the whole as a whole.
Brilliant. Yeah, so the library as a setting, I mean, it is also just so brilliantly symbolic. Yes, it functions on a very literal level within the story, but we can apply the library as a symbol of so much. I mean, this we're going to talk about themes later, but this is
The
this
internet.
it's the internet. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
it's very much the internet. It's knowledge, it's
Yeah,
access to knowledge and all the implications of that, all the access to not just information but disinformation.
Yeah.
It's so tremendous what he's doing here. But
Mhm.
Carlos, your thoughts on the library as a setting?
It's one of my favorite possible settings that one could create. Obviously, book lover's dream. But also I like that it's in the middle of a kind of uh, is it like a desert city, or there's a desert on the outskirts of the city?
Yeah,
The the imagery of the dust that he brings up all the time in this, at least the first two books, is very, very cool. But also, it's not just to create atmosphere. I think the dust is a big part of it, of like playing with memory and playing with things that get buried and all this kind of stuff. And the library being this sort of vast, expansive collection of dusty tomes that perhaps people have forgotten. And this may be information that will help people learn how to go forward, but we're always just going in circles because, the control or dissemination of that information is very complicated. And that complexity comes out in the second book for me.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I really love the setting. It reminded me a bit of Dune. I guess if you smash Dune and the ending of Interstellar together, that's kind of what the first book felt like to me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really cool. Huh. That's I never heard anyone say that before. I think that's brilliant. I also love what you mentioned about memory, and clearly, I feel Mark Lawrence is one of those thinkers who ponders the nature of identity and how much it rests upon memory, which is
Mhm.
notoriously unreliable. And we could extend that not only to personal memory, but to a cultural level, where societal memory, right? And how also very unreliable history
yeah,
tends to be. So there's just some really great things that he's doing by creating this magnificent setting. And yes, I think we're all aware that there's Mark Lawrence wasn't the first to come up with the idea of an infinite library. There's also Borges
Yeah.
has done something sort of similar as well. But this iteration of the infinite library is really brilliant. And Borges, of course, didn't know about the internet. So this is I think a really cool version for our times. What Mark Lawrence is doing here. So
Very
awesome.
timely. Very timely indeed.
Very timely. Very timely. Like it's I love all kinds of fantasy, but I'd be hard pressed to mention stories that are somehow as relevant as this manages to be to our times. It's really something. But cool. So I thought we would move on to characters, and I'll let Carlos start us off with whichever character you want to talk about. So who do you want to talk about? What do you want to say? Just dive right in.
Well, I think my two favorite characters, and now from the two books as well, are Levira and is it Selcha? I'm not sure.
It's a C, right?
Yeah.
I was saying Kelsa, but that's
Kelsa.
probably wrong.
That's very Celtic. That's very Celtic of you.
Yeah, it's Celtic or Celtics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Whichever you
so
say is fine with me.
Levira and my head was saying Selcha. But yes, I think also the naming schemes of the characters is quite, if you happen to at least know like a little bit of a Latin language, perhaps it might seem very obvious, or not even, because I think her second name, Levira, is Page, which is very on the nose kind of humor. And he's got a little bit of that in the epigraphs as well, and in
a ton of it.
Yeah, there's even actually that's going to remind me of the epigraphs. Quick tangent. There's one that I really enjoyed from the second one, which was when Selcha and her brother are digging in Craft City. They're working on the dig, on the excavation. There's a quote that probably only people in Ireland and the UK will get, from an Anthony Robinson, which is something about when you're excavating, it's important to blah, 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 blah. And Anthony Robinson is probably a play on Tony Robinson. And I think it says the book that he wrote is Excavating Craft, Anthony Robinson. And there was a TV show, a reality show about archaeologists that would go on digs, and the presenter of that show was Tony Robinson. It was called Time Team, and it was very famous over here in Ireland and in the UK. And I like those little bits of meta commentary that Mark Lawrence throws in there. But anyway, speaking of that dig, I thought the Selcha storyline was immediately the heart for me of book two. So I really latched onto her. And I feel like even thematically, she was the driving force of the second book. I felt like Levira, I really loved her in the first book, and I liked following her. And obviously she kind of acts a bit like the reader being thrown into this unknown world, and you pick it up along with her. But that sort of she's that inquisitive, doesn't take any crap kind of fiery spirit that I tend to latch onto in fiction. So I enjoy her a lot in the first book, but I think Selcha in the second book stole me. And in terms of the theme of, he goes for more looking at class and slavery in book two, which I really like. I like when stuff starts to deal with class. Class is a very prevalent issue on this side of the pond. And I really liked how he did that with Selcha in book two. And a lot of her conversations then when she gets into, is it the castle with all the rich people? There's some really great conversations that happen there that I loved. And in the first book, I think Levira, she is me now reading this story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
another meta level thing going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you picked up on a bunch of important things that I think through both of those characters, Lavira and Selcha, as you were saying, or Kelka, or whatever her name is. I feel like there's a lot about othering in here in general,
Yeah.
that class and race and species, even
Yeah.
uh, the real
For sure.
a shocking thing in the book that wouldn't burn. I will never forget the moment when I realized that to both of them, so to Lavira, Evar's species, although she didn't know it, she got to know him thinking, oh, he's
Yeah.
human like me, is the Sabber, is the other, is the monster, right?
Yeah.
But to Evar, being a Canid, Lavira's people, the human, he saw her as himself the whole time until because of the library and that particular section of the library where everything is as you want it, not as you want,
Yeah.
but as what's familiar to you. He thought of her as a Sabber, as the other, and you realize, oh my God, there. The whole time I thought, of course, for up until a certain point, that we had just a romance between two people, but it turned
Hmm.
out to be something very different at a certain point, and suddenly you realize, oh man, this is actually kind of cool. And then you get more of that othering when you realize, oh, here's this other species being introduced here through Kelka and her brother, through their narrative.
Yeah.
And yes, they came from some other world, from some moon or something. And I forget. You're gonna have to remind me of the. My daughter stole my book, so I can't remember all the
Oh,
the
I don't
names.
remember the name of the
Uh,
world.
The world. Yeah,
yeah.
that world we did see briefly in the book that wouldn't burn, though, as well. When Lavira entered
Oh,
it and couldn't breathe, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there
oh, is
was.
that what that was?
Yeah,
Oh,
That's what that
yeah,
was.
yeah.
I actually didn't cop that until the second book when they started talking about, oh, our bodies are adapted to this sort
Yeah,
of air. And I was like, oh, that explains that one from the first book. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What are Kelka and her brother called? What is their species?
his name is Hellet. That's his name.
Yeah, Hell.
Um,
What are they?
this
What are they?
There's Ganar. The
Ganar.
Ganar.
That's it.
Ganar. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Ganar. So yeah, there's just a lot in here about othering and finding oneself in the other, which is so beautifully represented through the relationship between Evar and Lavira. And
He
they,
went for a bit of a Romeo and Juliet with that.
or
A bit
Beauty
of
and the
the,
Beast, or
or
yeah,
Beauty and the
yeah,
Beast. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
That kind of forbidden love.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
I
What
found it
was
was,
cool though is it wasn't obvious though right off the bat.
yeah,
That's
right.
what was so neat about the first book is it turned out to be the Beauty and the Beast or Romeo and Juliet type thing.
yeah, yeah,
You didn't know that until way later.
yeah.
What were you going to say,
And
Carlos?
it's um it's oh, what was I gonna say? Doesn't matter, it'll come back to me. We can move on.
We'll come back to it. So yeah, brilliant. So Lavira and Kelka, I totally agreed. They're brilliant. And I agree with you as well, Carlos, that Lavira is really center stage. Although Evar, I would say, is a close second in the
Hmm.
first book. And then Kelka really does kind of steal the show, so to speak. But she carries those themes. The same themes really do, I think, intertwine from the two books really nicely. And we do get plenty of Lavira and Evar as well in book two. So,
Yeah.
any characters that you wanted to talk about, Jarrod, that we haven't yet?
Um,
Still some good ones.
yeah, I know. It's hard not to choose Lavira in Evar.
Yeah.
Because
Well, we
they're
haven't
such
talked about Evar really yet.
such a central characters. But I love the dynamic between Evar and his whole family there.
Yeah.
Um, what was his sister's name?
Clovis.
Clovis, yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
and the so I love that whole dynamic that they had because it was so unique compared to other family dynamics because they were raised in such a unique and interesting way. And of course you find out a lot more later about who was raising them, but the so that was a very unique surprise also at the end of the book that been burned. But
Hmm.
um so I really love that whole dynamic and how they approach problems and how they um it was just so different than what you a normal typical society or family structure would be. And I thought it was extremely inventive and imaginative on Lawrence's part. Um, and so that was really fascinating every time I read about it. And then I really loved Kelly in his in her brother, um,
Ellis, yeah.
Hellet,
Mm.
and I really like how um, Hellet kind of was damaged in a way, and I really like how that uh, informed the story and moved the story in certain directions because of what happened to him and her feelings about that. And that is a because I've seen plenty of siblings. I have plenty of kids, and I've seen how they interrelate with each other, and that just felt so genuine and real, that relationship between those two, and
Mm.
how she takes on some guilt for what happened to him, and how she's trying to really deal with that throughout the whole second book. It was just, I thought it was beautifully done, and I really latched onto that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
It's
let's talk
also,
about, go ahead, Carlos.
I just remembered. It's also like that relationship of the brother doing a lot, kind of taking a lot of pain on his shoulders, so that maybe it softens some of the hardship for her. And it sort of reminded me a little bit where maybe she's realizing how much he is sacrificing for her. It reminded me a little bit of the Bellison and Barden relationship in Deadhouse Gates,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
I also latched onto. And it was a very similar setup where,
Mm,
they're working in the mines. Spoiler alert for Deadhouse Gates, whatever. Um, but they're working in the mines and they're going through hardship. And obviously, Barden has his own agenda there, but he does form this sort of big brother persona. And obviously,
non-dysfunctional, yeah.
Fellowson is a little more abrasive at the beginning, but I found that dynamic was a little was reminding it was reminding me of that in this one with Selja and her brother, and
Mm,
the how much siblings sacrifice for one another, and sometimes it's not appreciated by the younger sibling, um,
yeah.
until later,
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how much of Helith's state of mind is because of Starval and who's the brother, the historian brother who went missing for so long? Begins with an M, I think.
Mayland,
Mayland, yeah.
and is
How much?
Mayland maybe is
Yeah,
that
Mayland,
that's yeah.
and I feel like a lot of his, mindset was a result of their deliberate toying or using exploiting him as a tool to get
Yeah.
after, which it turns out to be they're on the side of destroying the library because you have this we haven't mentioned yet, but there's this big conflict that goes back to the legend of the founding of the library, where you have these two brothers, one who is
Yeah.
the creator and the other is the destroyer, and which is really a central question about humanity is, are we actually worth saving? Are we redeemable? Are we trustworthy with knowledge, which leads
Mhm.
to power? Because we've proven again and again that we're actually not very trustworthy when it comes to knowledge. And yeah, we do some good things, but we also do some incredibly destructive things with the knowledge that we get. So they're on the side of, yeah, let's just raise it all, bring it all down, and then we won't have all these big wars and conflict and exploitation and slavery and everything else that comes with civilization, right?
Yeah,
So
and I love the question he raised as well of it really depends on how that information is disseminated to people, or how people um I guess excavate for it. And especially the whole allegory of the library being the internet and the assistants being search engines, Google, Yahoo, whatever, even social media websites that have a control of the information that you see. Because if you interact with a certain type of information, you get more of that type of information fed to you without seeing another perspective. So the cool thing of within the library, you kind of see what you want to see. And sometimes the characters don't even know what they want to see. So they just get fed what the library thinks their brain is open to, you know?
Yeah,
And that kind of stuff I just really loved. That was cool.
very dangerous.
Hmm.
Perhaps we should finish talking about Evar's siblings. We mentioned
Oh, yes.
Clovis went from being a kind of a, yeah, I like her in the first book to, oh, I love Clovis.
I like Clovis a lot. I actually
Yeah.
like Clovis more than Avar. I'm not the biggest fan of Avar. I gotta
Oh,
say.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I found his sections in the first book more interesting than emotionally engaging.
Uh-huh.
And I think he served a function, like he's a vessel for the idea, more so than I latched on to him as a character in both, to be honest. Um,
So I think I have a theory about that. I think,
cool.
yeah, I could be completely wrong, but by the third book, you're going to love Evar more. That's my
Uh-huh.
prediction. That by the end of the third
Ah,
book, you're gonna be like, oh, I actually do think he's interesting.
let me write
Yeah.
that down.
Yeah, because I think he's that kind of a character that grows on.
Mm.
I mean, he is in a way, he is the least interesting of the siblings because Clovis is awesome at combat. Carol is like the psychology master.
Hmm.
Starball is the assassin. Mayland is the historian. What's Evar? He's just not the best at anything, right?
He's just there.
He's
Yeah,
second
but
with all of those things. So he's
Yeah.
being set up, I think, very
he's
deliberately that way, right?
he's the sixth man off the bench.
Right. Yeah.
He's
Six man off the bench.
he's the guy that can fill all the roles,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he
And
does at times.
there's a reason for it. There's a
Yeah,
reason for it. We're gonna
yeah, I
see.
agree. Yeah.
But he also seems to be the most empathetic of all of them. And that may have something to do with this book that is
Mm.
the title of everything here. The book that wouldn't burn is also the book that broke the world. It's Levira's story book that she wrote, which is part of the whole meta part of all of this, right? Like this is the
Yeah.
book that is within the story. But I feel like there are moments when this book is hovering outside the story, and it is the key to everything here. And we're going to find out more and more, I think, in the third book. But
I love how the central conflict, shall we say, is not one big, large villain that we need to defeat, obviously, which is very typical in fantasy, but it's more he takes it back really grand scale with a kind of biblical creation myth and how the source of all conflict for species is actually knowledge. And from knowledge stems belief, which then probably creates religions, which creates camps of people, which creates those others. And the root of that is actually knowledge and the control of knowledge or what you do with it, instead of, just a villain doing villainous things. It's a little more interesting,
it is interesting and it's so complex. And you see it even, we've asked this question, is humanity trustworthy when it comes to knowledge? And the same family comes up with different answers. In the end, you have
Yeah,
Carol siding with Ute.
Hmm.
yeah,
They're the reformers. They want to keep the library alive, keep it going. And then you have the destroyers. And then you have the third faction, which is Ute's daughter, who turns up in here, which I thought
yeah.
was kind of interesting as well. So yeah, Ute's daughter is the preserver side, I guess you could say. Like Ute is the compromiser, right?
Compromiser.
And then
He's
you
the
have,
he's the fence sitter.
yeah,
Which is probably, I think, where I found myself, because depending on my mood and my level of cynicism on the day, I might be a destroyer, but I don't want to be I don't want to burn books. So
Yeah.
I know,
Well,
right? Yeah,
it's like your analogy with the internet. It's
yeah,
like we're using it right now, basically, for this
yeah,
great chat, but also how much bad is on the internet. There's a lot, and there's a lot of, it's a lot of poisonous places on the internet. So you waver between that, this is awesome what we're doing, and then, well, greatest place in the world either. So where do you take that? You get the two brothers who are the source of this conflict, so to speak. And it kind of like you said, it reminded me of very
Mhm.
biblical in nature with the brothers who kill each other, kind of Cain and
Right.
Abelish
Right.
almost. And I found that fascinating because that was kind of revealed in the second book.
Yeah.
And I just found that fascinating. And he used a lot of that in some of the epigraph too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
those references. And so there's, that conflict it's unique, like you said, in a way, because it's not, how do you choose? How do you choose? And how do you, like, I can't see right now how this gets resolved. I can't guess that future. And so I'm endlessly fascinated. And
Yeah, that is so cool. And those brothers, they actually make an appearance, but I felt like the whole time in that scene, I was reading them on a literal level, but also on a highly symbolic level.
Yeah.
And I think it says even in the story that they appear as according to the beholder. Like they might look different to you
sure,
or to me or depending on your species or what have you. Like there's no fixed form for them. They are representations of something. Like
Yeah.
these polar sides here of this conflict, this eternal conflict between our tendency to create and make civilization and then our tendency to destroy, and it's just really brilliantly done, actually. Like I love how this story functions on a very literal level as a story, but also on a big old meta level with all the symbolism in here. It's pretty rare to see something like that. But,
He's not afraid to show you that the argument is a lot more complex than just burning down a library.
right.
Um, it's a lot more difficult to choose than I think one might think going into the second book, particularly. Um, Now, like when we get into themes, or I don't know if we're getting into theme already,
Oh, I
but
think we're doing themes. We'll just throw it all in. Yeah.
but one thing that's like interesting that it did make me think about, it made me think about it in the first book as well. But like, this is slight tangent but relevant. That I had worked in social media for a long time, for like 6 years,
Mhm.
and specifically on teams that moderate content. And we would have to have basically discussions on a daily basis about what content we leave up and why, and based on policies that we don't necessarily write ourselves, but we maybe influence. Um, but ultimately, it's the company, the monster that decides what the policies are. We can suggest,
Right.
but it's basically, is this information um, following the policies of this company, of this entity? Does it toe the line? Is this something we want on the platform? Is this something harmful? Whatever sort of blatantly harmful stuff, yeah, we would remove. But those conversations always get a lot more complex than just the initial, you sit down and you read a thing and it sounds bad for somebody to say on the internet. But then when you dig into it a little deeper, it's a lot richer than you think.
Hmm.
And maybe that other perspective is very needed. But every entity that controls information will have its own agenda. And
Hmm.
you will not always agree with that agenda, even 50% of the time. Um, but you know that you are influencing information that people are seeing. And that's a difficult thing actually to come to terms with. And I think that's the one big theme in these two books that I think he was going for. I think this is Mark Lawrence's real attempt at doing some literary fantasy. And quite
Yeah.
sometimes in the second book, I found that maybe he fell into the trap of what a lot of literary fiction falls into, the trap of, okay, here's my theme, and the characters maybe get lost in that, and maybe some of the intricacies of the plot get lost in that. And I felt that a lot of that theme was repeating itself in the second book. I
Mm.
like that he added in class and slavery in the second book, but that's where some of my issues came in with the second one, where I felt like I wasn't necessarily learning or exploring a lot of new things. Um, but again, middle book could be.
I do want to ask you guys though, because I think it's cool how we get to that decision point at the end of book two.
Yeah.
Are you going to go with Destroyer? Are you going to go with Preserver, or are you going to go with the Compromise? You know, you have to decide which one are you going with. Carlos, you already said you're going to go with you. Did you say that?
My work experience will go with compromise. It's
Okay.
always difficult to find, but people find it. So
Okay.
I'm going compromise. Yeah.
Going with Ute and
Hmm.
Carol. I think Carol Carol was the only one that went with Ute, I believe, right? Do I
Yeah.
have yeah. Whereas
Yeah.
Lavira was almost forced to go with Ute's daughter into the
Yeah.
preserver side.
Yeah.
And finally, the destroyer side, where the majority of them seem to go. So, Jarrod, where are you going? Are you going?
Well, there's a because the diploma's the middle is the hardest, of course.
Yeah.
And there's actually a great line in the book here earlier on that says people don't like a host of options, no matter how nuanced the debate might be to start. If a lot of people are involved, and ultimately condenses around two poles, and that like just encompasses this whole conflict. And that was
He's such a quotable writer, isn't he?
Very
oh
cool.
yeah, I got
Oh
them
my
all
God.
in here.
Yeah.
and and so and the you he didn't make a strong case
No.
compared to the case that the other two were making.
Isn't it always so much easier to be impassioned about the extremes?
Exactly, yeah. And
Look at our
so
world. Look at the world we're in. We have people
Yep.
who are screaming on one end of the political spectrum and on the other, and it always feels like, why can't we just, where are the youths in our among our leaders
Yep.
nowadays,
yeah.
right?
And so like you guys were saying earlier, this it's so relevant to today,
Yeah.
that the theme in this book. And yeah, I want to say, yeah, let's compromise. Let's work this out.
Okay.
But it's very difficult to see this coming
Yeah.
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I'm with
just
you
like
guys
it's
for what it's
yeah,
worth. We're on Team Ute, all three of us.
yeah,
Team you. Yeah.
yeah.
Team you. It is difficult. It is very difficult, but it's so telling that the louder or the more impassioned plea usually wins out, or the more charismatic plea
Mm,
Right.
wins out, which I think is where the Dune aspect comes in a little bit, because
Sure.
it's very Paul Atreides, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to talk about a certain character that I was very sad about in book two. And I think a lot of this may be just because I'm a father of a daughter. But when Malar, one of my favorite characters, plus he's cool because he swears all the time, and he's
Yeah,
badass. When he died in book two,
yeah.
that was very sudden and very. I had to put the book down and like, no, that's not. I got a little choked up there because he did it, of course, for Lavira. Like that loyalty, that instinct to protect was so strong in him that he literally took a bullet for her. So that character is no longer in the story, though. Which any thoughts on Malar? Let's pause and have a brief observance for him at least here.
He's good at those characters, and he reminded me of Makin from The Broken Empire. I know, Jarrod, you haven't read The Broken Empire yet,
Yeah.
but that kind of steady, I'm gonna keep you on the straight line, maybe call you out sometime.
Also a bit of a
Was
mentor figure. Yeah. Yeah.
a bit of a mentor figure, exactly. Yeah. Straight talker. I love a straight talker.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I that one cut me up, yeah.
And what a story arc for him. Uh, just he because he found her, he brought her to the he
Yeah.
brought it to the city, the library, and he was partly responsible for getting her in there, making her, giving her a better life, really. and a life that she was craving in some ways because she was a seeker of knowledge even before she got forcibly removed from her village. And so he kind of set her up and gave her what he wanted. And so what a story arc to go from there be to being one of the what do they call the assistants?
The assistants.
To
Yeah.
being
Yeah,
one of
it's
the
just
assistants that actually raises Ivar and Clovis and all that
That
stuff.
was another whole mind-blowing thing.
Oh, mind blowing.
Wait, the assistants, the warrior and just I
Warrior,
think
yeah.
she was just the assistant, right?
the
Yeah.
assistant, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
my
he was the
God.
warrior. Yeah, the soldier,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
And
soldier, yes, sorry.
yeah. And and to go from that to then
Yeah.
back where then he, takes the bullet. Just amazing story arc for that character. And yeah, it really heartbreaking. You
Yeah.
said, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, that really blew my mind as well. The whole, oh, you get to the end of this book and you realize that was Levira and Malar, all these centuries raising the Kenned siblings.
Yeah, I loved it. And that was the bit where I was like, oh, this is Interstellar.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan movie, but when he gets to the sort of physical library of time at the end, or it's sort of a library of memory at the end of Interstellar, and you realize that he is the ghost that kickstarts what's his daughter's name? Murph,
Yes.
on
Yeah.
her
Pushes the
path.
books out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, yeah, he went for that twist here and fit it into his story.
Yeah.
I thought that was mind blowing. Yeah. Really,
So
really cool.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. And the sacrifice involved in that.
Mhm.
So you have
Yeah.
Levira's sacrifice for Evar and the other
Yeah.
siblings. Like they had this relationship with the others. Like Malar and Clovis could easily be at each other's throats, but he feels like a father toward her as well because he literally raised her, right? So there's
Yeah.
that memory of being like a father to them as
Yeah.
well. That he has that instinct to protect them, even though she could rip his throat out easily, right, when he's in his human form. Uh, it's just brilliant. So she had Levira had this love that brought her to this place where she was in this stasis for centuries, and then Malar's devotion to Levira. I love how he's basically, I'm on your team. When he says to her that line, which team are you gonna?
Yeah.
She doesn't know. I don't know what to do until the very end, where she's almost forced to decide. But he's like, I don't care. Whatever team you're on, that's my team. I'm on your
Yeah.
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really just beautiful. So yeah, that was an emotional moment for sure.
Yeah. And it's very relevant because it to a father-daughter relationship almost because it's like no matter what decisions your kid makes in their lives, it's like you're on their team. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, and it relates um like history and history lessons. It's like he mentioned here one time about wisdom's earned. You can't just you can't just teach the history. It has to be learned and it has to
Mhm.
be earned. And that just relates so much. Like how much does he wish he could have told them about life and what's going to happen and how much he couldn't because it has to be earned. But the fact that the soldier had to be silent and couldn't actually speak kind of puts that barrier right there,
Mhm.
on a more in a more physical means in the story, but it's very metaphorical to that lesson that has to be learned. And I really just
And there's more again of memory and identity in all of that too. It's incredible.
yeah,
It weaves all these themes together. Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent. And we're missing anyone? I mean, there are other characters.
You got
What
new
was
POVs in this one, our picks as well.
our picks was exactly who I wanted to talk about next. So I
Yeah.
did love his development. I felt awful about the other one though, who was squished. What was his name? He was a sibling.
Oh God.
Gone but not forgotten, except I forgot his name. Anyway, I don't have the.
I don't remember.
He's in the first book too, though. He's the aristocrat kid whose sister
Oh.
began as kind of a rival of Lavira's,
Yes.
but he was a dear friend. He was part of that inner group of kids that Lavira came up in the library with, and he makes sacrifice. He saves Lavira. Gets squished by the giant Kelka.
Spider thing, or is it a spider, or
Wasn't it like
It was a giant Ganar, wasn't it? Like a
it was the giant Kelka thing.
yeah.
Like she made all these. I mean, talk about, oh my God, she made all those machines to get at the people she thought committed this atrocity, and manipulated her brother and her into wiping out an entire city. And it turned out she was wrong about who they were.
Yeah. You know what's fascinating about that is, like, throughout the whole book, I knew it wasn't Lavira and Navarre that were responsible. You knew the whole time. Yeah. And you're like, but the whole time it's like, well, who was it? And, you know, that was the mystery, not who it wasn't, but who it was, you know.
Mayland and Starval.
Yeah.
And of the two, I think Starval was the one that was friendlier, and Mayland was the one that Kelka always felt there's something really sinister about this instance, right?
Yeah. I liked the unique races that he creates in these. I didn't think that there would be, any room left in fantasy for more kind of unique races and stuff like that. But I liked the fact that, Kenneth, Gunnar, there's giant sort of insectoids in this one.
The skier.
Yes, that's the one, the skier. Yeah. I enjoyed that. And some of the world building itself is pretty unique. You know that there are other planets, other worlds, where there are no humans. It's just very sci-fi, which I
It's interesting too, though, because as creepy and scary as the skier are, the villain that I hate the most in here is King Douchebag, whatever I forget his name.
Owen-Old, yeah.
Owen-Old, yeah.
Owen-Old, yeah.
And they resort to cannibalism.
Cannibalism. Oh yeah.
I feel like that is just such a metaphor as well about how the elite often essentially devour. I mean, I was talking the other day to AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon about Jonathan Swift's very famous essay, A Modest Proposal, which I'm sure, Carlos, you must know, and Jarrod, probably you know it as well. But spoilers for A Modest Proposal. It's from the 1700s, so if you don't know it, you should. But it's essentially a text where, by very satirically proposing that, well, the Irish are starving and they have too many babies, so why don't they just let's make them eat their babies and have problem solved, right? But the whole thing, of course, is a takedown of what England had been doing to Ireland and essentially devouring its people. I feel like that's kind of applicable here. That's Owen-Old here, and his elite, the other aristocrat guy, the creepy one that was always eyeing Lavira. I forget his name, but they are the devourers, and they, in this case, literally resort to cannibalism. Yeah.
I don't want to poke the bear on the internet, but how close is Owen-Old to Donald?
Oh, I mean, I would say that if there isn't a playbook for tyrants throughout history, it sure feels like there is one somewhere that we don't know about, I guess.
Yeah. I think that capital O for Owen-Old is a bit of another cheeky wink from Mark Lawrence. If I have learned anything about his sense of humor, that is probably.
I mean, if you switch the letters around a little bit, yeah, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what his hair looks like, but
we gotta ask him for some art in some special edition.
If the hair will confirm it,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, you know, people say.
But anyway, yeah. Anything else that you guys want to talk about from either book thus far?
Well,
You know what we ought to do is predictions for book 3, because I'm sure we're going to be entirely accurate.
well, I had a question
Okay,
first because I'm still not entirely sure what the exchange and what you
what
think.
it is?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
so for one thing, there are two things that it gives you access to. It gives you access to different worlds, depending on
mhm,
where you are, but
yeah,
also gives you access to different times,
Mhm.
yes.
depending on which entry you take.
Yeah,
Uh,
we get an idea what it does, but
right.
what exactly
Who made it?
So,
How did it get
origins of
there?
it, and
oh
is it
yeah.
related, like was it these two brothers, these two mythical brothers who don't really in a form we actually, you know, we only in a form we happen to see them as we, you know, from our own perception.
Mhm.
Are they responsible for that, or are they there in spite of that, or is that responsible for them? I'm really hoping the third book is going to delve into that
Uh-huh.
and give us some kind of answer there.
I mean,
I'm
I
let's
really
see.
curious.
Carlos, you have
I
thoughts on that?
I imagined it more. I don't know if either of you guys have watched Lost, the TV show.
Mhm.
No.
Towards the end of Lost, people obviously have their criticisms of the ending of that show, but I kind of love the ending of
Even
that show.
I've heard about the criticisms. I don't even know
Yeah, I actually love the end of Lost, but
One
anyway,
of the few, huh?
yeah. But there's a sort of a section, another kind of, yeah, creation myth with the two brothers. There's Jacob, who is sort of the man in white, and then there's the man in black as well, who are two brothers who basically created this island, and this island shifts.
Yeah.
And there's a place where they go, it's kind of a cave that it's always left ambiguous as to was that cave always there, or did one of the brothers create this cave, whatever. I kind of just imagined it like that, and I think he might leave that ambiguous,
Mm.
as this is kind of nature fighting back a little bit, or it's just this little place that maybe ties all of the chaos together. Um, I don't know. I don't think we'll get many answers to what the exchange really is,
I feel
or
like
where.
this is also a creation of Mark Lawrence, the scientist, the mathematician, the physicist. And
Yeah,
there is, I have a very poor understanding of all this, but I know that if we were to add another dimension, let's say we could perceive things with, instead of just our normal four, like with the fifth dimension, that we would see all of time at
yeah,
once. We would see all of time at once. And I feel like I agree with Carlos that it's going to be left ambiguous probably, but that
Somewhat, yeah. I'm
it,
hoping
it
we
is
get something.
essential to the nature of the library, which it's at the heart of it in a way, because the library does connect all worlds and times and everything, and all the knowledge is being put together. So it seems like it's the engine that makes the library work, maybe in a
Mm.
sense. But
yeah,
I feel like it's going to be, we're getting soft magic here in our science fiction or whatever you want to call it. We're not going to get a thorough explanation of how this works.
Yeah.
That's a
Which
prediction.
and it's great that we can say fantasy and science fiction in the same breath with the same
Yeah.
book. That's
Yep.
yeah,
great.
And both
yeah.
applicable.
Yeah.
So
Have you guys
I
read
don't. Re-
the short stories?
not yet. No,
I
have
haven't
you?
read the short
They're
stories.
fantastic.
Okay.
Cool.
And they really open up a couple new dimensions that not doesn't change anything in the story or anything, but it's really
I
nice, really
gotta.
cool.
I gotta ask one of the most important questions. Is Wentworth in one of the short stories? The cat
Cat, which is based on Wobble,
Wobble, his huge Maine Coon. Yeah,
The
huge
cat
actual cat
the
that
cat's in the first
that allows
the
the
little
rest of them to live in the house. I think Wobble
yeah.
does.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yes. So that they're very
Wentworth
enjoyable.
is in one of the short stories.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about the raven or the
Oh
dog
yeah.
or the other characters that were in
Oh
there.
yeah, jeez, there's so much.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell he's an animal lover. You can tell he likes the animal companions, and he throws them in there, and they're not your typical animal companions either.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but
Wentworth was kind of scary, right? In the book that broke the world, Wentworth, it proved to be the most formidable. Like the skier didn't have a chance, man.
that's a strong kitty. Yeah,
That's something else. I mean, and
yeah.
it seems to
Yeah.
be somehow maybe Ute poured a lot of his power or his self into Wentworth or something. I'm not exactly sure how Wentworth was.
That's some more questions to be
Yeah.
looking forward to in the third book.
Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts or anything that we want to leave on? Or how about predictions? So what's going to happen in book 3? Are we going to have, first of all, Evar and Levira? Pretty central question here. Are they going to be able to get together in book 3? Are we going to have a happily ever after here?
The will they, won't they?
Yeah.
I think they will. Um, my obviously, my one criticism really of the second book, which I was a bit more mixed on, I still liked it. I still think it's good. I was more mixed on it. Was that I didn't feel until the end we were really going anywhere new with Levira and Avar.
Uh-huh.
I felt like we were treading the same ground that we were doing in the first book, which was what gave me that sense that maybe this could have been one singular book, especially since he was going for the more literary theme driven fantasy, which is cool. But I felt like, okay, I'm getting what you're saying with the first book. What else are we doing with book 2? But with the ending, with them choosing whatever sides, there are more questions now about them as people and how they're going to, I guess, tackle this situation, this decision that they have before them, that now book 3 could, wrap that up a bit nicely, and certainly add another layer to the trilogy to justify the existence of the trilogy in my mind.
Yeah.
Predictions, I don't really have predictions. I'm not one for doing predictions either. I am very fly by the seat of my pants, throw whatever at me. So yeah, I don't really have predictions.
But I have to ask you about Clovis and her love interest for the second book. Where are we going with that?
Ooh.
What was his
Yeah.
name again? Why do he's the
Uh,
tall friend of Levira's.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of he was the he was
POV character here in the second
yeah.
book. What was his name, Carlos?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
Arpix. No,
Arpix. Thank you.
Arpix, yeah.
Arpix, yeah. Arpix.
That by the way was one of the more enjoyable aspects of book 2.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Carlos. We didn't get any further really with Levira and Evar, but we did get Clovis and Arpix.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, he's done more romance in these.
yeah.
A little bit more kissy in these books than he's done before.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I appreciate, to be honest, I like romance in my fiction.
I mean, Book of the Ancestor has some kissy, but yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't read Book of the Ancestor.
Okay.
I'll have to move that kissy up
I
to TV.
wouldn't call kissy the main thing in Book of the Ancestor, but there's some. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
Not a
not the main thing.
romantasy, in other words.
Yeah, it's not the main thing in here either. It's but it's I think it's very well done. I like how it came about in the yeah, it's interesting how I don't know what's gonna happen between those two because I have a feeling that events are gonna overtake them, and we're not gonna really get.
Yeah.
We're not gonna see them, go much further in their relationship than what's going to happen in the events of the story. My prediction for that part of it.
If he's playing with a bit of forbidden love trope or unrequited love trope, he might kill one of them off.
Possible.
Ooh.
No,
And he's not afraid to do that
he's
either.
not
so-
afraid
He's
to
not
kill
afraid to
people
do
off.
that.
Yeah,
No,
poor
he's not.
Malar. Yeah.
No, he's definitely not. I think Ute
yeah.
is not going to survive book 3.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
Ute, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ute is not going to survive book 3, and Levira is somehow going to have to take over, being like the entity in charge of the library.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah. I don't know. I should go bold though. I should go.
Go bold.
I should say that the library is gonna get destroyed,
Oh,
and then it's gonna restart again, and we're
Okay.
gonna have a
oh,
news
interesting.
story come out of it. That's my
Really
bold
bold
prediction.
would be Wentworth becomes the king, supplants Owen Old.
Well, if you ask any cat, they're already kings. So
Yep.
True. True. All right. Well, we did our best, folks, with the predictions. So I feel like this is a series where I just don't know really what
yeah,
anything could happen. Who
Yeah.
knows?
I really don't know.
Yeah, but cool.
I
Well,
think seeing the library destroyed would be actually quite cool and pretty ballsy.
yeah, kind of a Fight Club ending.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, or,
Blow
you
it all
know,
up. Yeah.
if we have this, if we arrive at the compromise, I think Mark Lawrence is smart enough to arrive at an interesting out or resolution for a compromise. Like,
Mm.
I think we'd all like to switch off the internet for at least an hour a day in our daily lives. You know, if there's a big red button somewhere that could switch off the internet for an hour a day,
The whole world.
yeah,
Yeah.
we could, we could all get on board with that, and maybe we can just shut the lights off in the library for an hour a day, as commanded by Levera and Ute.
Yes, but then they're acting like gods, so who knows if
Yeah.
it's the right thing. Uh, no, I think he's hinted at societies being destroyed before, civilization being destroyed before,
Yeah.
and
Well, if you know what
so
the name of the city is, and
Yeah.
it's told in here many times that this city's been there and it's been destroyed and rebuilt and
yeah,
destroyed
right.
and
And
rebuilt
so
over and over. It's something that he plays with. There's not a exactly. There are a couple little interesting things that tie all of his little trilogies together, and the
Mhm.
name of the city is one of them.
I was
There's
gonna
also-
ask you actually, Philip. I don't want to spoil things for Jarrod, so I'll be a little vague.
right.
But do you think that it is the same city as the one that we know, or do you think it is an alternate universe, timeline, whatever? What do you think?
I think it could be the same. I think it could be.
I think it's the same, but even further in the future than where we were before. No
Yes,
spoilers.
much further, much further.
Yeah. Yeah.
much further. Yeah. Sorry,
that's
Jared.
that's not spoilery. That's enticing. That
Cool.
makes me want to go read more
There's also a
stuff.
character that turns up in every Mark Lawrence trilogy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't want to spoil that for you either. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you like circuses, Jarrod?
Some, yeah.
I think you might. I think
I
you
could-
might enjoy some of Mark Lawrence's books.
Yeah.
Great. Do without the clowns, but the rest of the circus.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're safe. Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Well, I really do appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun. We should get together again when we get to read book 3, perhaps.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we will have another discussion on this. I actually feel like there are very few series where I have so many questions, and I'm going to be very keen to read book 3 and see what the brain of Mark Lawrence comes up with here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I will have a link in the description to both channels, to Jarrod's channel, which is the Fantasy Thinker, and to Carlos. Just is one half of his channel, really, but his channel is StoryTube. So we will have links to both of them. Both awesome, really wonderful channels with great content to make you think. So
Thanks for having us on, Philip.
Yes,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it, because these books that Mark Lawrence writes are the juiciest. And if you find yourself not even talking about plot points, it means that it's a good book, you know.
I think so too. I think I
Mhm.
totally agree. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Philip. This was great fun.
Always a pleasure. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time.